As in all the Murlis, there are many areas for investigation. And let's take a look at what it means to imbibe virtues, because we hear about it quite a lot. And BKs speak about dharna as meaning imbibe virtues. Of course, dharna means a lot more than that, but that's, of course, one of the things. But and it's never really clarified in a very clear way what is the meaning of imbibing virtues or becoming virtuous. How do you become virtuous? What does it mean to become virtuous? So different people will do it in their way. Baba says always, we're all number wise. So we understand this number wise. And that means also we understand about virtues number wise. So most people's approach to virtues is the list of virtues that you get on the wall of the history hall in Madhuban, right? And they have listed 36 words, which are called virtues. And nowadays, people talk about values, and they use exactly the same words as they use for virtues, and then they call it values. Actually, virtues are different and values are different. Values are things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when somebody says, oh, the problem is there are no values, what they mean is people don't agree with them. That's what they mean by no values. So it's not very clear, and it gets very personalized. And so people do it in their own way because they don't have any option. But still, it's quite useful to analyze it a bit and see, okay, what are the different ways? Because different people prefer different ways. So what does it mean to develop virtues? And this concept of developing virtues is very much part of the patriarchal culture. And the patriarchal culture is described in detail in the Manusmriti, but I'm sure that nobody's read that because it's such a big, long book, and it's not a very nice thing to read, quite honestly, because it's it kind of puts you in a very, very small prison. And that's not what people really like. And this is because the patriarchal religions, which is basically all the religions, they say that people basically are bad, and that you have to be made good by the dominant figures of your society. And then they will tell you how to be good. And if you don't agree to that, they will punish you and force you to be good in the way that they think is good. And so a lot of people think about virtues either consciously or subconsciously in that sort of a way, because that's how they grew up. And they were exposed to that if they were in religions that are very strong on that, or in families that are very strong on that. And so they reach a mentality of self-suppression. And when a person suppresses themselves and believes that they're not really good people, it makes them really weak, and they can be easily manipulated and used and made into victims. and then they suffer. And a lot of people suffer because of those things. And actually, from Baba's angle, that's unnecessary suffering. Some kinds of suffering are necessary, and then there's unnecessary suffering. So it's not really necessary suffering, but when your karmic accounts come up for settlement, then you do experience maybe mental, physical, social, financial, relational, professional, whatever, different kinds of pain. And whenever you experience pain, then if you don't have enough power, then you do suffer. And so the question of virtues is very much tied up with that. And I think here we need to separate it off from that. And what Baba tells us always is that your identity is not that you are a bad person. Otherwise, all the religions tell you you're not good and you have to become good. And so this gets imported into Gyan a lot because people do this almost automatically. Because it's so much there in the culture. And all that is called Parmat. Baba talked to us about Parmat today in Srimat. And so people very often wonder, okay, now how do I really understand what Baba's telling so that I can do it right? And there are some BKs that they will say to themselves, or they will say to us, am I doing this right? Am I meditating right? How do I know if I'm doing this right? And that's a very reasonable question, because this practice is really very different from all the other different ways of becoming a better self that are applied on the basis of the existing religions. So it's very subtle. So one very important thing to do is to think about, what does it mean for me to be subtle? And whenever he speaks about the soul is very subtle. So he says your identity is you are pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light. And if you are in your power, and if you're in connection with Shiv Baba, that yoga will activate these original qualities. And I'm using different words for different things like this. So this purity, peace, power, love, bliss is the essence or the quintessence. Quintessence means the 5 essences, the quintessence of your being. So the other religions, they never tell you that. They tell you that you're sinful and so on. And Baba says, you have debts and they will come up for payment. So therefore you need cash to pay for them. And it's not dollars and euros, but the cash you need to pay for your debts is yoga power. So it's nothing to do with being a bad person or not. It's to do with settling debts. And if you have debts, you have to pay for them. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So this we have to do. But having debts doesn't mean you're a bad person. And the way that people look at each other is in terms of, is this a good person or is this a bad person according to me? So this practice of judging people and of expecting to be judged by other people. And so one quite important thing to practice is to become independent of other people's opinion about you, because they control you by their opinion and they diminish you or put you up, some people, they put them up on a pedestal and they say, oh, this is a wonderful, marvelous, fantastic, amazing person. And then everybody else says, yes, yes, yes. And that person may or may not be. It depends on the criteria that you use to decide if someone's wonderful, marvelous, or fantastic, or what. But if you look at the biography of people, nowadays in movies, they also make documentaries of biographies of people. And you do get people who have biographies made of them. They become very famous people. And when their biographies are examined by a biographer, they show that they became famous because of a lot of talent. Like you have biographies of singers or footballers or politicians or people who become famous. And you also see that they have weaknesses. And there are very, very few famous people who do not get adversely affected by what happens to a person who gets really famous. And a lot of them become drug addicts. A lot. That includes the sports people, the movie stars, the politicians, all of this, because they are under a lot of pressure to perform, and they can't always perform. And then because they're famous, everybody wants to, offer themselves to them. So they become very corrupted by money, by relational involvements that are all over the place. And so their families get wrecked. Their mental stability gets wrecked. Their behavior becomes catastrophic. And then they have to put on a front for the public, which will hold up a little bit, but then that too will fail. So this sort of thing does happen quite regularly. And so we don't want to end up like that, right? So we are, Baba calls us very often incognito. We are incognito. We are externally very basic human beings, but we are cultivating ourselves on the inside. And your virtues are, I think, one good way of thinking about cultivating your virtues is the expression of these 5 quintessential qualities. Because a virtue is a way of conducting yourself, which, according to the Murli today, causes people to respond to that way of conducting yourself by giving you blessings. Dadi Prakashmani used to talk about this quite a lot. And she used to say that part of her, because people would ask her, how come you are Dadi? Why did Baba choose you? And what's so special about Dadi Prakashmani? And she used to say that, okay, she makes her spiritual effort very carefully and consistently and conscientiously, very much. She was always very close to Baba. I lived with her for about 7 years, so I got quite close to her in that time. To see how she functions, how she operates, how she leads the yagya, all of this. And she used to talk about how her stage was partly based on her own spiritual efforts, her yoga, her practice, her study. But half of it was blessings from other people. And I used to wonder, what is this energy of blessings that she's talking about? And I did experience something which made it clear to me what is this energy of blessings. Where I was in a situation once where I did something which a lot of people were quite happy with. And while this was going on, I noticed a wave of very, very positive energy that I could actually feel. And because it was a lot of people, I suppose you could feel it very strongly. And then I thought, yeah, this is what Daddy's talking about. That when you do something which a lot of people feel benefited by, they respond. And they respond by sending an energy, and which comes to you. And if somebody is hurt by you, or they feel sorrow, or they feel harmed, then they will respond to that. They won't say anything, they won't do anything, but they will think. And these thoughts are against you because you did something that they didn't like. So they will think like that. And that energy will actually get in your way. This negative energy, right? So he says that, okay, a virtuous person will know about this. And you will interact with people in such a way that they will feel genuinely from you something that is good for them. And so it's like a knee-jerk reaction, an automatic reaction. When somebody is really nice to you, or good to you, or beneficial to you, you send back a good energy. Now let's take up the word jealousy, because that comes in too. And a lot of people feel jealous of a virtuous person because the virtuous person is loved by many people. And most people, they want to be loved. And it's quite rare to relate to Baba with such an intense relationship that you experience concrete love from Baba. And Daddy used to experience this. She used to talk about this. And so it was, when you do what you have to do to gain this experience of Baba's love, then you do not want love because you have it. But if you don't have it, you want it. And if you see someone who has it, that can provoke a feeling of jealousy. And what is said about a jealous person is they like to harm the person who is enjoying the love of other people. That's called jealousy. And so you find that. And so if you are a person who's very virtuous, or not just only virtuous in the sense of giving love and receiving love, or being nice to people and receiving blessings, but another thing that people get jealous of is if you're powerful. And one thing is people want love, and the other thing, people desire power. And the battlefield that Baba talks about is a battle of, is a power struggle. And he says, your enemy is not these other people. Your enemy is Maya or Ravan. Because it's not a story about who's more powerful among BKs or among people in your professional arena. That power struggle is not the one that we are engaged in this practice. We're engaged in a different type of power struggle where I, the soul, need to have power over Maya. And so I need to know that what is this Maya? And sometimes Maya is called the five vices. And so you may say, okay, there's the five vices on one side, and there's these five qualities on the other side: purity, peace, power, love, bliss. So these vices, ego, greed, attachment, arrogance, and lust, these are all reactions, like urges in the soul in response to your spiritual emptiness. You don't have power. You don't have love. You don't have peace. You don't have purity. And you don't have, what was the other one? Purity, peace, power, love, bliss. Bliss. You don't have bliss. So you want it. Because what do you want? You want something you're hungry for. You're hungry for whatever you don't have. You're empty. So our problem is that our level of spiritual power is insufficient. We actually don't have any other problem, just insufficient spiritual power. And so everything we do in Gyan is different ways to try to acquire more spiritual power. Because as soon as you have spiritual power, then the reactions to your emptiness definitely diminish. If you do take a lot of power from Baba, then you will feel deeply, you will feel, I have power. So you will not need any. You will not desire any. And you don't overcome desires by suppressing them, because that makes you even more empty than you were in the first place. So that's counterproductive. It's much more effective, much more realistic to just understand that all of these, what you may identify as negative feelings inside yourself, is just a sign that lets you know that you need to take more power from Baba. And so one thing of yoga is taking the energy from Baba. And that energy will impact your levels of purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. So that when you come into interaction with another human being, you can be assertive and assert who you are, which doesn't mean being bossy or forceful, something like that. But it means that the normal mechanisms to get people to diminish themselves don't have any impact. That's assertive, I see. So even if someone will say something to make you feel bad about yourself, you will not be impacted by that. When you're weak, you are impacted, and then you have a reaction. And then that's not assertive, that's aggressive. So we're making some fine distinctions, how we're using different words, and the only thing we have is language, so we have to use it. But to assert that I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light means you're really in that state. And that if you're really in that state, circumstances will not take you out of that state. So this Raj Yoga that we're doing, which is called Sahaja Raj Yoga, so-called easy Raj Yoga, which is not that easy, but it means in the context of people. So you're in the context of energies where you're not able to assert your original condition of purity, peace, power, love, and bliss, and you get pulled into these behavior patterns that are the patterns of somebody who's spiritually weak, which means victims and predators. If you're a predator, you're equally weak as if you're a victim. You just decide whether you want to be predatory about your weakness or victim about your weakness. But either way, it's weak. So we should not be deluded into thinking that people who are very aggressive are powerful. No. Daddy Janki used to define Maya as an energy that makes you afraid, terrorizes you, or that attracts you. So you get attracted and you get controlled because you're attracted. Someone can bribe you with something or another. Or you get controlled by people being aggressive and you move the way they want because of that. So this is Maya. Either aggression, terror, or attraction, which is bribery. And these two things are a form of corruption. And when you are under the influence of someone who's forcing you, making you afraid, or someone who's bribing you, that will make you do action which puts you into debt. And then you experience suffering. So this is very, very subtle, but very important to know about, because then you are alerted to make sure that you don't fall into those traps. Because what's called as the Ravanmat or Parmat, or the prevailing social attitudes, they train you to be either a victim or a predator through this aggression or bribery. And that's called Ravanmat. And then Shrimat is different. It says, hey, you don't have to play that game. That's not good for your dignity. That's not the sign of a deity. A deity is somebody who's independent of those forces. So if we want to make our spiritual efforts on that level, we can, but we need to understand things in a better way so that we can move ahead better, and also so that we can accumulate our yoga power, because you can sit in yoga for a couple of hours or 3 hours or 10 hours or 10 months. But if you don't become free from this very subtle type of Maya of being impacted by aggression or bribery, then you lose everything. And you don't want to do that. So this evening we'll go further into the details of this Murli. Om Shanti.